Hi, everybody. My name is Laura DeVoe, and I am a member of the Build the Era Advisory Board, and I am located in Newton, Massachusetts. Build the Era, if you are new to our organization, is an education and advocacy organization focused on transportation and infrastructure as it relates to the Department of Transportation, the DOT. Volunteer founded and volunteer powered by supporters, volunteers, and staffers from the Pete Buttigieg 2020 presidential campaign. Build the Era's purpose is to connect citizens from across America to the Department of Transportation by education and information that the public, educate and inform the public as to what the Department of Transportation does and does not do and why that matters. Educate and inform the public to the role that infrastructure plays in America's quality of life, provide training and guidance on how to engage with local and federal elected officials on matters related to Department of Transportation initiatives, provide training and guidance on how to advocate for causes using relational organizing as a primary tool, and finally, create measurable effectiveness and change. Our mission is as follows. Build the Era is committed to making the Department of Transportation's role in American movement understood by citizens and activating them to engage for smart and equitable investments by the Department of Transportation and for better multimodal planning in their communities. We want to thank you for being here and helping to contribute to the attainment of our mission, vision, and values. The Build the Era website, which is buildtheera.com, houses a variety of links, including links to all of our social media accounts, as well as our YouTube page. This event is being recorded, and it will be put up on our YouTube page for people to share, as well as view again. We have a variety of wonderful events that have already happened. We are happy that we just finished our first year. This past weekend, we had a strategy session with our board, and we'll be putting out an annual report sometime soon. We are really fortunate in that we have had a variety of wonderful guests and events ranging from pedestrian dignity to electric vehicles, as well as a litany of events focused on the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this last month, if you've missed it, I would encourage you to please watch it. We had one of our advisory board members, Jonathan, hosted an amazing event on pedestrian safety and Vision Zero. So would love for you to go back and watch that and see what that's all about. Tonight, I am thrilled to welcome Karen Whitaker. She uses she, her, hers pronouns. She is the Deputy Executive Director of the League of American Bicycles. In her role as Deputy Executive Director, Karen helps with organizational strategy as well as leads the League's federal policy efforts to secure bicycle and pedestrian friendly policies and funding through advocacy with Congress, the administration, and with national advocacy partners. We have a short video supplied to us by the folks at the League, and it tells you all about them. So before we get into our questions, here is the video.
I ride to stay active.
I like to go fast.
I lost 20 pounds. I felt amazing.
It allowed me to be even more adventurous.
I like to explore new places, to go camping, to have a good time with friends.
Puts me in a better mood. I bike because it's good for the world.
We at the League have been promoting bicycling and protecting the rights of people who bike since 1880. Here in Washington, D.C., we are amplifying the voices for better bicycling across the United States. There's a great diversity in bicycling, for transportation, for recreation, for errands, for whatever. We also know that there's great diversity in the people that bike. Of the 51 million Americans that bike, They look like the rest of America. For generations past and to come, the League of American Bicyclists represents people who bike in the movement to create safer roads, stronger communities, and a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. From Capitol Hill to the streets of your community, the League amplifies your voice for better bicycling. The League is your neighbors, your kid's teacher. We're your city council member and the local coffee shop owner. The League is a national network of people and organizations transforming lives and communities through better bicycling. We believe that everyone should have a real opportunity to bike for transportation, for well-being, and for the pure joy of it. Better biking doesn't happen without you. The League is a network of change makers nationwide. Individuals, advocacy groups, businesses, community leaders, and more, all speaking up for these investments that make bicycling better for all. Join the League and add your voice as one of the millions of Americans who know better bicycling can make life better for everyone.
All right. Well, thank you to your wonderful group, Karen, and I want to make sure that we also thank them for their amazing work on that video. I thought it was great. So thank you and welcome to Build the Era. And where are you calling in from? Are you in Washington, D.C.?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to see the transportation and the Department of Transportation just being in the news and becoming more of a day-to-day conversation issue. So I actually live in Washington, D.C., but I am in Florida at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. And we hope that Florida is treating you well. And so, yeah, we're excited about the transportation. That's why we're all here. And, you know, we do see a real change. We do see that even legislators, as well as people in the industry and other advocacy organizations, definitely can tell that there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, at the Department of Transportation, and how they kind of move about their day-to-day has really brought the department out into the world a bit more, which is great. We also knew that was coming because we had a lot of us who were part of the start of this organization had a lot of great things to say about, obviously, about Pete, and we knew what was coming. So, so talk to us about the League. It's been around for over 100 years. What's the origin story, and kind of where is the League at now? So for those who don't know a lot about it, tell us about the League of American Bicycles.
Sure. So we were founded in 1880 with the goal of getting the roads paved. So if you think about those old bikes, they were the penny farthings with the huge front wheel and the little back wheel. And they're fun to ride, but they're hard to ride. And there was a lot of crashes on those old roads with ruts and things like that. So the bicyclists got together with the bike industry and some other folks and said, hey, we want to pave these roads. Now, most of the bicyclists were from cities. And so they started getting a lot of people in the cities, and then realized, well, if we want to convince Congress, we have to talk to everybody. So they went and they got the farmers on board from the rural areas and started talking with local politicians, and they decided to do a petition. It's really interesting because the issues they faced then are the same things we do today. So they decided to get a petition, and they got 150,000 signatures on a petition back in the mid 1880s. And they connected all the pieces of paper, put them on a 6-foot scroll, and they just rolled that scroll right into the Senate and said, look at all these people that want to get the roads paved. And that scroll is actually in the National Archives.
Wow.
So they succeeded in that. And the result of that bill created what was then the Office of Roads, which was a predecessor to the Department of Transportation. And in getting a mile of pavement in like 10 or 15 different places across the country, so that a whole bunch of people got the chance to see what it was like to ride on a paved road.
That's amazing. And now you've got me with all kinds of ideas. In my mind is that what kind of scroll do I want to roll into the floor of the Senate? But that's another story. So I want to remind folks who are here live in the event that if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to put them up in the chat. Bill, who is our co-pilot, will be monitoring the chat, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. So some questions that I've prepared tonight, I want to really talk about to start the infrastructure law. We spent a lot of time with Build the Era doing some advocacy work around that, writing to Congress and Senate members, educating our members on this. What are you the most excited about with the infrastructure law? When you and I first had our first Zoom, you did say that it was clear that this is a different Department of Transportation, that they're actually listening to things. What are you the most excited about as far as the League's priorities?
Okay. So for the League, our mission is to build a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. And we do that really at the community level. We have a program that certifies the city as being a bicycle-friendly community. And so we coach folks through that. South Bend is a silver bicycle-friendly community. So we've worked with Secretary Pete before. So at the federal level, we're really looking for policies that are going to make it easy for local governments to become bicycle friendly. So we're looking for funding, we're looking for local control in some cases, so cities can decide that, and then bicycle friendly policy. So in this bill, we're really excited about a couple of things. One is that there's a program called Transportation Alternatives that funds about half of the funding that goes to biking and walking, and we got a 60% increase in that. So wow. That's a big increase with a lot of policy changes to make it easier for local governments to access that. So we're really excited about that. Our other big concern is around fatalities. Okay. When you look at pedestrians and bicyclists, we make up 12% of transportation trips. We make up 20% of fatalities, but we were getting about 2% of the safety dollars. And so this bill now has a provision that if a state has a high rate of vulnerable road user fatalities or biking and walking fatalities, then the state has to spend 15% of its safety money on biking and walking safety. And that, we think that could be a sea change in how state departments of transportation think about it. Yep. And also just about how the data is collected. One of the things that the US Department of Transportation does is they interpret the law and they decide how it's going to be enforced. Mm-hmm. And we're really happy with the way that they've been doing some of that. So they've set up a separate account for biking and walking safety. So now we can see how and where states are spending the money, and that can help us figure out what kind of advocacy we need to do.
That's great. As a follow-up question, you talked about coaching folks on how to make their communities biking friendly. What does that mean exactly? So for community to become bicycle friendly, we have an application process, and lots of times we'll hear from a city about, well, I'm not sure where to start, or sometimes we'll hear from someone that says, my community is not on board, but I want to start building from the inside. Where are the easier places to start? Right. We really try to meet communities where they are on that. And we're really excited because we just hired a new staff whose job is going to be working with communities to really get through the process. So, you're really looking at an opportunity. So if someone's watching this and they say, I would like my community to go through this, they would go to your website and start the process there. Is that how it works? Yeah, absolutely. They can go to our website, or they can go to their state or local bicycle advocacy organization, which they can also find on our website. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd say is that we certify businesses and universities as being bicycle friendly too. Wow. So if taking on your town seems too busy to, like a big step, and we usually coach people to get a team together to do that. Yep. But maybe you could start with your place of work. Right. Right.
because there's
So if you work in, an environment, especially some people who might work in, say, one of those, business parks or something like that, it makes a lot of sense to try to make that happen. And as a person who works in higher education, the idea of having a bicycle-friendly campus, of course, makes me really happy. So I think that's great. And so when you and I were talking originally, you were saying that there are over 350 advocacy groups that you work with. Talk about what those advocacy groups look like. Are they kind of limited to local municipalities, or what does it really look like there?
So the groups are all different. They're not necessarily, or they're not chapters of the league, they're their own organizations. So in New York City, you've got a group that has maybe 40 staff. It's much bigger than the league. And then in some smaller communities, it's a group of volunteers. But we generally see them at the state level, or we see them at the local level. And so the state level is really focused on state policy, and the local level, they're focused on their cities.
So one of the things that we get a lot of questions about when it comes to issues around transportation is that people have this mindset that a lot of the work in transportation is this kind of urban center type things, like, whether it be mass transit, or it be bike to work, or scooters, or whatever the case may be. But we get questions from our rural members and people who live in rural environments. Can you talk to us about how the league engages with rural communities?
Sure. So again, first with that bicycle friendly community program, we try to meet communities where they are and start with what they're looking at. Are they trying to build their tourism industry? Because biking can definitely help with that, making walkable communities. Are they concerned about safety? Because a lot of times those state roads also have safety issues. And biking and walking facilities may look different in a rural area. It may be adding shoulders to the road so that you can get to your neighbor's house without having to get in your car. Or it could be trails that for kids to go to school. So it's the same usage, but the facilities might look different.
Great. In addition to other biking organizations, do you work with other coalitions like rail, public transportation? Do you try to partner with them? What does that look like?
We do, especially with transit groups, because we know most people who bike for transportation also take transit sometimes, right? So we want to make sure that everyone has safe, accessible choices to get them where they want to go.
Right.
So we do work with transportation groups a lot. We work with Amtrak, trying to allow bikes on trains, and then making it easy when you get off the station in the community to get around. We also work with the Transportation Equity Caucus, which looks at race and economic justice issues and climate issues as they pertain to transportation. So one of the things that we're working on, there was a program in the transportation bill that was created, but it wasn't funded. And it was to deal with urban heat islands and flooding, particularly around transit stops and sidewalks.
Yep.
So can you plant more trees? Can you use reflective surfaces or green roofs on your bus stops, things like that?
So when you look at some of the common things that kind of that are issues with your bike community, as well as some of these mass transit communities and climate communities, is there something, it sounds to me like, as we've been hearing time and time again, that there's these equity issues that kind of roll through all of it. So if you have a heat island, you also probably have issues around a food desert, which is issues around mass transit, which is issues around whether or not you have bike lanes. Is that something that you see, or am I just kind of making this up off the top of my head?
Yeah, absolutely. We need a transportation system because we need to get people from where they are to where they need to go, whether that's healthcare or shopping or school, or just to be connected to their community. And we've spent a lot of time building a transportation system around cars
Mhm.
and not around people.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that we've been trying to push for and that we do as a coalition.
Mhm.
And we see that disparities or that lack of safe access, particularly in low-income communities and communities of color. When you look at pedestrian and bicyclist fatality rates, they're much higher among communities of color.
Right.
And so that's why looking for programs that can focus in on safe infrastructure, particularly where those safety needs are biggest, is
Mhm.
important.
Mhm. We've had some questions in the past about bike lanes and about safe bike lanes, and we know that that looks different in different communities. So in a rural community, not having a sidewalk or not having even a shoulder is a problem versus in an urban environment. We have one of our board members for Bill Diera. She lives in near Chicopee, Massachusetts. In the center of town, they put up these bike lanes with these completely bizarre kind of things to block the riders off from traffic, from vehicle traffic. And when she showed us these things, they looked like they were made out of aluminum. They were just junk. And they ended up finally taking them down because people were just literally rolling them over. So the question I have for you there is, when communities are coming to you, can they come to you and say, look, we really need some thoughts on what's best practice? What does this look like? Can you help communities in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say the Federal Highway Administration has actually put out a guide. It's a chart that has the speed on one side, the speed limit on one axis, and the volume of traffic on the other. And then within that, they'll tell you what's the right kind of bike facility, bike lane for you. Sometimes it's separated, sometimes paint will do. It really depends on those two factors.
Yeah, yeah. So you're able to connect people with existing resources that come down through other agencies, which is great.
Yeah.
We have a question from Bill. In Portland, there's a lot of hostility between drivers and riders. Any best practices you can share about how to bridge that gap and try to build some understanding?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. When people are starting out, we've seen some communities like Chattanooga, when you go to get your driver's license, you have to go on a bike ride.
Mm.
So you can feel what it's like. We've even seen trainings for bus drivers where they put them on a stationary bike and have a bus drive by, so
Right.
that you can feel that. Another thing we do is we have a bicycle friendly driver certification that we've seen towns take up, where it's mostly for fleet drivers, where they give you a situation, say, okay, who's in the wrong here? Is it the bicyclist? Is it the driver? Okay,
Right.
what could they have done? So those are some big things. When you're talking about the community and the community meetings, I think you have to talk about the fact that we're all pedestrians at some point.
Right.
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 Even when you're driving and walking across a parking lot, or if you or your kids just want to go to your neighbor's house, are you safe doing that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And thinking through that and just trying to listen. What we found is that what drivers are most afraid of is they're afraid of hitting someone.
Right. Right. And that makes sense. And I think that, you brought up this idea of fleet drivers learning what it feels like when something goes by them. I saw something on the news recently where they were training drivers on how that feels, and they had them on a bike and something went by them and they were like, whoa, and they were like, that actually made them think twice about what it did feel like as a bicyclist in traffic, along with buses and trucks and that sort of thing, even just cars. When it comes to things like safety, there's been a lot of chatter around safety. The Secretary Buttigieg has put out some thoughts about crashes and car crashes and getting us to zero crashes. When you heard that, and that is, vehicular crashes, I'm assuming that's different in terms of what metrics they're keeping when it comes to traffic accidents of cars and motor vehicles. And there's a different metric when it comes to bicycles. Is that accurate?
So yeah, it's all within the same database, and they
Okay,
break out.
they
who
break it out
is-
different.
Yeah.
So when you heard that that was going to become one of their big guideposts in terms of what they're hoping to accomplish, what was the kind of feel around the league at that point?
Well, I'll say this, every Secretary of Transportation says safety is their number one priority, right? But we have never seen someone actually come out and write this national roadway safety strategy. So we were really happy to see that. They did take a lot of input from the community of transportation advocates. So we were happy to be part of that. And I think one of the most exciting things is they're changing the frame on it. So they're taking what we call a safe system approach, which is based on the idea that it's a shared responsibility. For a long time, when we think that there's a crash, it's one person's fault or it's the other. But we know now it has to do with, part of it is about the engineering. You can design a road that's going to encourage people to drive slower. You can design, you can have safe passage for people biking and walking, or complete streets when you do that.
Right.
And the other thing about the safe system approach is it takes into account that we're people and we're fallible and we're going to make mistakes.
Right.
And so let's build a system that's going to limit the damage that we do. And so that we were really happy to see them take on that approach, that safe system approach, and to have it involve not only behavior, because there's also individual responsibility there, but also look at the engineering and what does the engineering encourage us to do, as well as the cars and the safety regulations around cars. There's so much technology now, but there's a whole bunch of different cars that have automatic emergency braking, but there's no standard test for it. So you could get a car that has that, but you don't know if how good it is, So that's one of the things we're seeing the DOT do that we're really excited about.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Jonathan French, our in-house transportation expert, asks, we've seen lots of past design guidance about, quote, accommodation of vulnerable road users, but it's clear with the amount of deaths and injuries that the term needs to change to integration. What does that look like to you and the league? And if you have a follow-up question to that, I'm going to tell Jonathan to go off mute because I'm not going to be able to answer it.
Yeah. So I think what you're getting at is that biking and walking has always sort of been the afterthought. We're designing for the cars and not for the people. And so another thing that the DOT just put out recently is their Complete Streets initiative, which talks about when you build a street, build it for everyone. So who's using the street? How are they using it? Some people call it building for people 8 to 80, so that both your kid and your grandmother can use the street safely. So we're excited to see that push, but just to give you a sense of how things are ingrained now, one of the first pieces of guidance that the DOT put out after the bill was this memo that said, hey, we're going to encourage you to fix the roads you have first before you build new ones. And when you're fixing those roads, make them work for everybody. Just what we were talking about. It's just a memo saying we're going to encourage that. And they saw a huge backlash from a lot of the state DOTs who are used to just building roads the way they build them, right? So we really love what we're seeing coming out of the DOT, but it's going to take a lot of work to do that paradigm shift. And it's going to take all of us to support that work to make sure it happens.
I appreciate that. I want to talk about my favorite obsession of late, which is e-bikes. And, I'm looking at an e-bike, I'm trying to decide, what do you see with the growth of this type of bike in your world? And are you seeing, I know that there was some discussion with some of the senators about a bill that would allow for some tax breaks or incentives. What are you seeing on the e-bike front?
Well, first, we've seen a huge increase in it. We had a bike boom over COVID, but
Yeah.
even more so among e-bikes. And what we know about e-bikes is most purchases of e-bikes go to replace a car
Yeah.
versus replace a bike. And so we think there's a lot of potential there, whether you're talking about climate change or public health or just reducing congestion. And I just want to say there's three people, we see sort of three main groups of people that are buying e-bikes. One are older people that were biking and, now need some help getting up
Yep.
hills. Another is another is young people who are buying e-bikes instead of cars, which we think is a
Yep.
great trend. And the third group are women who want to bike for transportation, but women more than men sort of do what we call trip training. So they don't just bike to work and then bike home, but they're like biking their kids to school, dropping off the dry cleaning, going to work, on the way home, getting dinner, picking up their kids, coming back. And so
You're
then you've got
exhausting me. Yeah.
right? We've all been there.
Yes,
But those kinds of trips that it's just, it can, maybe a pedal bike just feels like, oh, I can't do all those hills. I can't carry all those things. An e-bike makes that possible.
Mhm.
So we really see people, those e-bikes being able to take on short trips. Right now, almost 50% of transportation trips in the US are 3 miles or less. So those are really easy trips that we can move out of cars onto bikes. Now, the e-bike rebate that we were working on was part of the Build Back Better. And it's part of the climate suite of things. So we're
Mhm.
hoping that there will still be some movement on climate on that. And we're waiting to see. Also in that bill was a bicycle commuter benefit,
Okay.
which would let people who commute by bike get some benefits the same way that some people get free parking or you get transit benefits.
Yep.
That's something we had. We lost it in the tax cut bill in 2017. We want to put that back. So we're hoping to see both of those things through the climate initiative.
Awesome. This is a question from Tracy. She's thought about an e-bike, but she has a neurological condition that would cause balance problems. Are you aware of maybe a trike or some kind of e-bike for folks who might have an accommodation need?
Yeah, there's definitely e-trikes, and you can get those cargo ones too that will have a big basket so you can put stuff in, or even bigger basket that you can put somebody in. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. You have a big event coming up, and I want to spend some time talking about that. It is the National Bike Summit, and it's the 23rd Annual National Bike Summit, which will be taking place later on this month, March 27th to the 30th. And at the National Bike Summit, attendees will convene around the theme of choosing our future. And can you tell us more about the summit, what that looks like for participants, and what it would look like for people interested in attending the event?
Sure. So this year we have an in-person version and a virtual version. All the sessions and plenaries will be virtual. And so it'll be a 2-day, the virtual conference will have 2 days of sessions and then 1 day where we have a lobby day and get to lobby members of Congress. So the Building Our Future is in part because this big infrastructure bill just passed. And there's a lot of great things in that, but there's still a lot of decisions that are going to be made at the state and local level. And so this is a chance for advocates to get in there and help to use that huge amount of money to move towards, a more climate friendly, a more equitable transportation system. And so we're going to talk about some of that. We also have a big education program. So we're going to talk about our changes there. That bicycle friendly community designation I've been talking about. We've just revamped it to be to really center equity. And so we'll be releasing that and talking about the steps of that, which I think will be really great. We're going to have the mayor of Bogota is going to speak, and she is trying to build her city to be a 30-minute city that you can get anywhere you need to go within 30 minutes without a car.
Wow.
And so that's, we're really excited about that. We're going to talk about health equity. We're going to talk about some of the great things going on in Little Rock. And so that's going to be great. And then on top of that, on Wednesday, we're going to have lobby meetings for people to meet with their senators and their representatives. And just quickly, there are two issues we're going to talk about. One is the Healthy Streets concept program that was in the bill but didn't get funding to work on improving urban heat islands and flooding in low-income communities. The other is a funding program that was also in the bill but didn't get funded, where a community could apply for a big chunk of money to build out their biking and walking network. So maybe you have a bunch of bike lanes in different parts of the city, but they don't connect. This would be your chance to connect them to make that a safe network. We were really excited to get that language in there. Didn't quite get the money for it yet. So we're going to try to do that through the budget process.
And so for anyone who is here at this event and has RSVP'd, we will be sending out a discount code for those who want to attend. There is obviously the in-person option, but there's also the virtual option. It's a hybrid event. So even if you are nowhere near Washington, DC, you can take part in this event. And we would love to have you. And it was wonderful for Karen and the league to provide this discount, which I think is awesome. You know, when we look at what is the kind of the future of bicycle transportation and bicycling in America, you know, you've been with the league for a while. What are your hopes in terms of, like, by the end of the next 4 years, 5 years, what do you hope is really a marked difference in terms of the quality of life for people who bicycle?
I think two big things that we've talked about here. One is creating those networks within cities. So as communities become more bicycle friendly, it really is easy to do your day-to-day trips by bike or by walking or by connecting it to transit. And the other is that we really do make a dent in the safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
That we talk about Vision Zero and having a vision of zero fatalities, transportation fatalities, because they are all avoidable. You know, we'd love to see us get there, or at least be moving in that direction.
Great. Liz asks, any advice for encouraging municipalities to work together? I live near the border of another city, and the cities seem to have different priorities for transportation. And I see Karen smirking. So clearly this isn't the first time you've heard this question.
It isn't the first time. And I think, you know, in a lot of cities, there's something called the Metropolitan Planning Organization that tries to work at the metro region. Maybe working with them on their planning process to try to find if there's ways that you can, even if you start just by connecting facilities or connecting with one facility and then building from that.
And that would be another space that people at the league may be able to be helpful to folks. So for those who came on a little late, Karen was explaining a little bit about how the league can be helpful to communities as they're working to advance more bicycle friendly communities. And they work with not only urban and suburban, but also rural communities. And you don't have to just be a city or town. Let's say your business wants to be a bicycle friendly business, or you are a college student and you want your campus to be a bicycle friendly campus. That is another aspect that the league can get involved in, and they work with hundreds of organizations across the country in terms of making this happen. I have one last question for you, Karen, and that is, how can people on this call get more involved with you? Obviously, you have the event coming up at the end of the month, in terms of the opportunity to come together for that. But is there anything that you could use more help on a regular basis, in terms of how people can get involved with the league?
So our website is bikeleague.org, and you can sign up there to get our e-news and our action alerts. And so at the same time that we have the summit going on, we are going to be doing an action alert asking members of Congress to support these programs. I'll also just put my email in the chat, and folks can reach out to me directly if you're interested.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And I would be remiss if I didn't share my favorite picture of myself on a bike, and I'm going to do that right now. This is me
Nice.
on what we call an icicle tricycle, and it's actually a giant cooler, and it's a tricycle, and I used to drive it around the campus I worked at one point, handing out ice cream and other treats to my students. So I'm a big fan of icicle tricycles, so go on out and buy one today. So there you go. And that is it. And I want to thank you, Karen. If there's anything else you want to share before we log off for the night, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for being part of Build the Era event. We have been waiting to have a bicycle event for a while, and you did not disappoint. So thank you so much. And we want you to have the most successful summit ever. We look forward to seeing pictures and being a part of your community and knowing that you've done good work.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. And remember, follow us on all of our social media accounts. You can find all of our information at buildtheera.com. Please engage, please tag us, and please be a part of our organization moving forward. Bill, anything you want to say as we log out?
No, just for anybody who's logged in at the end because of some issues with Action Network, we are going to be posting this video as soon as possible on our YouTube channel.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.